Hi guys, I'm Adam, and I'm a crystal meth addict.
Hi, Adam.
So I was approached last week to talk today, and it was kind of a surprise because I am relatively new to the program. Today is 99 days.
Yay!
And at first I was thinking, well, what could I potentially give to anyone that might help? And then I thought, well, 99 days is still 99 days, and a lot can happen. So I immediately called my sponsor, and who's here tonight, and he said, you know what, just be honest, tell your story, and that's all you can do. So hopefully whatever comes out is something you guys can take from. I just start back when I'm from New Orleans. I moved around a lot as a child because my dad's job moved him a lot. But most of my childhood was in New Orleans. I was born in the South, raised by Southern parents, so being a Southerner is very part of me. And a lot of it really helped, or really kind of shows in my journey to where I am today, in the sense that because I moved around a lot, I was forced to make a ton of friends everywhere I'd go, or I just wouldn't have friends. And to me, that was just not an option. So being social was just always in me. And being in the South, and being specifically in Louisiana, the culture in Louisiana is very much all about drinking. And my dad, who was a wonderful man, great provider, was an alcoholic. And growing up, especially in a state where you have drive-through daiquiri shops, literally, it was constantly around. And you're going to hear a little bit about my father in this story because he plays a big role in where I am today. I have to tell you a little bit about him because he was raised by first-generation immigrants from Germany and Ireland, and they told him that financial status meant success in life. So him and his siblings, my aunts and uncles, all got amazing jobs. They were incredibly successful, but all of them hated their jobs. But it didn't matter because they were able to provide for their family, and that was the number one rule that my grandmother taught my parents, my dad and my aunts and uncles. Because of that, my dad dealt with it by drinking. And, I grew up in a suburb right outside of New Orleans that was upper middle class. We were all wasps. You didn't talk about shit, pardon me. You just hid behind closed doors and dealt with it in your own way, which for my dad was drinking. So then to talk about my childhood, growing up, I went to Catholic school because private school in Louisiana was more or less the better education, and private schools more or less was Catholic. And so I was that stereotypical kid that went to an all-boys Catholic preparatory high school, and I was dating girls, and then I kind of started realizing that I liked guys while puberty was happening, but it never really bothered me. I just assumed that's the way life was. It doesn't really matter if you're attracted to whatever you're attracted to. That's fantastic. So I always was comfortable with it, and then I realized that society kind of had an issue with it. I just didn't care. I was like, well, this is who I am, and I'm not going to change that about me. So my 16th year, that was a weird way of saying that. When I was 16, that was a really big year for me. I had my first boyfriend, who was kind of older than me. He was 25 when I was 16. She likes older men. And I came out, and Katrina happened, all in the same year. And you really get to know yourself and your family when natural disasters happen. My family actually took it pretty well, not surprisingly, but they were in a little bit of shock, but I guess they were more concerned with how society would treat me. My parents grew up and had a bunch of friends that died during the AIDS epidemic. So they just automatically assumed that I was going to get AIDS and die. And they also were worried that I would get bullied because they heard about all these stories about people getting killed for being gay. But I was very fortunate A lot of my high school friends were also my childhood friends. They apparently knew before I even told them. It was one of those cases. So when I came out, they were like, all right, great. So I was very fortunate, and I know that's not that's not everyone's story, so I do not take that lightly. That being said, in high school, again, drinking was very much part of my culture. I didn't really drink a lot because, again, growing up with an alcoholic father, I saw what it did to him, and I saw what it did to his family, and I just vowed I would never be like that. And I knew that alcoholism and addiction is rampant in my family, but I was so determined not to become an alcoholic. Ironic. And I graduated high school, went to college in Philadelphia, went to a fantastic art conservatory for musical theater. It was a 4-year program that was just phenomenal. I would never change anything about it. Again, college for me was very demanding. My course load was incredibly high, and then you went in straight into rehearsals after your classes were done for the day, and then the few hours you had before you had to pass out, you did homework. So for me, drinking was kind of afterthought. I did smoke some weed in college, but I stopped doing that because I was one of those, I'm such a control freak, and weed for me started making me feel anxious. So I was like, that's not for me. So after I graduated college, I decided to move straight here to New York. And I did exactly what a lot of people, their path is when they move to New York. They start auditioning for everything. And I was very fortunate. I was booking things left and right, tours and regional theater and off-Broadway and blah, 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 blah. And it was fantastic. But then around we're not going to do math. When I was around 23, 24, everything kind of shifted for me. I decided to try to stay in New York to make roots, and that meant that my auditioning became a little more selective. And to compensate, financially, I started finding gigs or, work as a server, and then that eventually led me into gay nightlife. And she was that poster child for gay nightlife girl. I still was starting out by dancing back up for drag queens and being in cabarets and, look at me, la la la. And it was fantastic and I loved it, but I realized that I wasn't getting up for auditions anymore. And I wasn't going to dance classes and I wasn't going to voice lessons anymore. And then that one year, I think it was 2013, I was pretty heavy into nightlife, but then also my father had to have heart surgery. The men in my family are genetically predisposed to having heart issues, specifically aortic aneurysms, which the fact that I did drugs, probably not the best idea for my heart. But so I went down to be there for the surgery, and the surgery went incredibly well. And so I came home. And then about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from my mom saying, your father's back in the ICU. He's not going to make it. You need to come back down. And I asked what happened, and she said, well, it wasn't his heart, it's his liver. Because he drank so much, his liver could not come back from the shock of such a serious surgery. So I flew back down, and I have to say this before I move on. Growing up, I was incredibly grateful because I never really had to deal with hardship. I was sheltered from a lot of it, and even with an alcoholic father, he tried his best to make sure that I could get anything I wanted as long as it was within reason. But I was spoiled, and I was sheltered, and death indirectly affected me. I lost my grandparents throughout my childhood, and I lost, beloved pets, and even friends from high school from alcohol poisoning. But there's something to say when you are in a hospital room, and your father's on the bed, and you're all around there because you want to be there for him, and you see him move on. I didn't know how to handle that. I mean, I know death is part of life, but you don't, at 24, you just don't expect your 55-year-old father to die. So I came back to New York, and I was in shock. I didn't know how to handle such an emotional upheaval. My family was all in the South, all kind of close to each other. I have a sister, and she and her husband and her kids and my mom were all kind of around each other. So they had each other, but I didn't really have anyone up here, except for my friends, which of course is valuable as much as you could hope for, but it's just not the same. And then I was given this amazing opportunity because my father worked so hard, and he made sure that my sister and I were given some sort of support system. So I was given an inheritance. Now, the only problem with that is I was never really told how or taught how to adult, if you will. So I understood the value of $1, but I didn't really understand the consequence of spending the $1 because I had more money than I knew what to do with. And that's not me bragging, that's me just saying, when you're 24 and you really don't understand like working for them like as hard as you need to work to make ends meet, you're just throwing money left and right, yet you're depressed, and you're in nightlife where there's just drugs all around you. That was when I was introduced to cocaine. And that was my drug of choice. It started out very slow, and it grew, of course, to become a habitual thing. And then you jump a few years later, and I was using cocaine every day. I really wasn't drinking that much because I was refusing to become an alcoholic. But Coke, sure, why not? So throughout that time, I was introduced to other drugs. Molly, G, K, you name it. But I refused to do 3 drugs: crack, heroin, crystal meth. I said, that's a line I'll never cross. Sure. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have not done 2 of the 3, but it doesn't matter. A drug's a drug. So, needless to say, a boyfriend I was dating at the time, he's also in nightlife, but we got into a fight, and he was like, I don't think you can stop doing cocaine. I think you have a problem. And I was like, oh yeah? So I just stopped cold turkey to spite him. And I have not picked it up since. Not saying that was the right reason, but whatever motivated me to stop doing it. But the problem was I wasn't dealing with the behavior behind the substance. I wasn't dealing with my depression. I wasn't dealing with my lack of self-identity anymore. And so instead of doing cocaine, she found crystal meth. And that was a very quick fall for me. I did it less than a year. And what's so funny was it happened to me at an after hours, and I was already on like 4 other drugs. And this person, they were smoking it, and they were like, here's some Tina. And they literally said, before you do this, no, this is not like other drugs. This will ruin your life. So literally you have like the drug dealer or the drug addict telling me this is going to ruin your life if you do it. And I was arrogant enough to be like, oh girl, I got this. I have my cocaine under control. She's got this. So I literally, I again did it the same way I did cocaine. It was just once every now and then, and that turned into multiple times a month, and that turned into every week. And it finally got around Halloween where I was at work, and I was just high out of my mind off of everything imaginable. And I felt, when I got home from work, I felt like, I don't know if it was my subconscious or I actively thought this, but I was like, I need help. I need to reach out, because if I don't, I will die. I don't know if it'll be soon or if it'll be later on in life, but it doesn't matter. So I reached out to my friends and to my ex, and at first, I started going to outpatient, and I was like, oh, okay, this is working, but I wasn't fully invested in it because I was still kind of embarrassed, So I would go, but I wasn't really participating, if that makes sense. So about a month and a half in, I stopped going because I stopped using. I started feeling kind of better. And then into this year, I turned 30 back in February. And for me, the fact that I made it 30, fantastic. But for me, 30, I don't know why, but 30 was such an important year. Like, I wanted to be at a certain place in my career and a certain place in my life by 30. Like, my 20s were for like fun, and 30s are, you have to be an adult. So when I was 30 and none of it was how I wanted it to be, I just went in a horrible, horrible spiral. And it was a very, very fast down for me. It was like maybe a month of me using again. And that was when my friends decided to come to my apartment and give me an intervention. And they said, if you need to go to rehab, we'll find you a place out of state, we'll take care of your dog, I have a dog, we'll take care of your apartment, we'll take care of your job. But I wouldn't do it. I was mortified. I was like, absolutely not, I'm not doing rehab. I'll go to meetings, I'll go to CMA meetings, AA meetings, but I will not do rehab. And knock on wood, it's worked so far for me. But the funny thing is that about 27 days into my sobriety, I went home for a family event. And unbeknownst to me, my best friends and my family had been talking. And my best friends obviously said, or my family kind of picked up on the fact that there was something wrong with me, because I would call them just randomly crying for no reason, because it was my emotions finally coming out. And so then, even though I was 27 days into my sobriety, they didn't know this, so then they gave me an intervention. And they hired this guy, and it could not have been more of a movie scene. It was pouring down rain. I ran outside the house with no umbrella, just being drenched in rain, called my sponsor, hysterically crying, being like, they hired some guy. And my sponsor, thank God, talked me down, and he was like, well, you look crazy right now, Adam. Go back inside, prove to them that you've been sober for almost a month, tell them you have a sponsor, take them to a meeting. So I took them to a meeting later that day, and that's when I came back home. And that's where I more or less now am in this chair. What I want to talk about now is the past 99 days, what has I found successful for me. There's so much, but there are three... Okay, cool. I might be talking a little fast, sorry. There are three big factors for me that have really worked. And the first one you hear all the time, but it's connection. They say connection is the opposite of addiction. And I firmly believe that. Being so social, I constantly was looking for connections when I was using, and I was surrounding myself with so many people, but I was incredibly lonely, incredibly depressed because I wasn't making any connections. It was all through a drug or, some drinking. What works for me now is, and what is so amazing, is I talk to my mom every single day now. And it's not an obligation. I look forward to it because she's become my best friend again. And I haven't had that in so many years. Because I just didn't feel like I could confide in her. And I was mad at my dad for leaving me and for not teaching me how to live adult, if that makes sense. So I found that parent figure in my mom again. And my mom and my sister, they both went in. They were like, we're here for you 100%. I'm so grateful for that. To the point where they did so much research that they were like, have you heard this TED Talk? And I was like, oh, I don't think so. And they sent it to me, and I think it's called Everything We Know About Addiction is Wrong. It is amazing. I'm not gonna lie. If you haven't seen it, watch it just for that one alone, because it talks about connection, and I was literally walking home from work, just weeping on walking down 9th Avenue, and everyone was like, "What's wrong with that queen?" And so, but it just made so much sense to me. But yeah, I figured out the last 99 days the difference between connection and distraction. The second part for me is self-care, and that could be so much. But I took it as therapy, meditation. I started meditating every day for 15, 20 minutes, either in the morning or at night. But it honestly has been life-changing just to be able to disengage in a constructive, productive way from the world for that amount of time, and just to check in with yourself. It's unreal. I strongly recommend it if you haven't done it. I go to the gym every day just because I find it cathartic. And in my weird, over-analyzing mind, I'm saying, well, if I'm working this hard on the inside, I want to be working this hard on my outside so I can see the progress. I mean, whatever works. But thank you. And the last part of self-care is I live to pamper myself, and I strongly recommend everyone to pamper themselves too. I'm obsessed with skincare. I do that like South Korean 15-step skincare every day. It works though. It honestly works. I try whenever I have the money, because I'm better now at my budgeting. I try to get like a facial or a massage, or I try to get my nails done or my eyebrows waxed or whatever. And it's just the practice of it. It feels so good to treat yourself, because my sponsor said, girl, you're working so hard every day on your sobriety. Make sure to have fun. Make sure to enjoy it, because why else are you trying to stay sober other than trying to stay alive? You want to enjoy life. And the last step, or the last part of my recovery that I've really found successful is step work. In my sponsor family, I've been told that we get through the 90 days to have a good sense of clarity and self-awareness again. And after 90 days, you start step work. So I just started last week, step 1, or the first step. And I kid you not, I already have found out so much about myself and my relationship to other people, and how my behavior is, and where my addiction comes out in my behavior, even though I'm not using. It's uncanny. It's kind of amazing. And I'm just very excited to continue in the step work, because I can't even express the fact that 99 days ago I could never imagine where I've been today at that point. So that was my rambling. I hope you guys got something out of it. Thank you so much.